Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. Going to talk to my good friend, Frank Granet. He's a regular contributor on The Price of Business. We are exploring through our ongoing efforts in the Price of ADHD business series that we've been doing, talking to some outstanding authorities when it comes to ADHD and looking at some healthier ways of treating this real problem. And it's a pervasive problem, but unfortunately a lot of the solutions being advocated out there only adds to the problem rather than helps. And so Frank's organization, our partners in this media campaign and effort, is the Coalition Against Over-Medicating Our Youth. You can learn more about them at CAOOY.org. Frank Granet, how are you?
Hey, Kevin, great to be on again. And today is no different, Kevin. We have a great guest on our show today. She holds a PhD in natural sciences. She's author of the newly released book that just came out, Erasing Autism, the Spectrum Balance Protocol. And we're going to know what that means. Our listeners are going to understand what the Spectrum Balance Protocol is after today's segment. And currently she is the medical director of Wellness Center in Durango, Colorado, and since 2001. And Dr. Shauna Young. Welcome to our program today, Doctor.
Hi.
Glad to have you on the program. I'm not sure if you need to give your elevator speech after that, but why don't you tell us a little bit about, your background educational-wise? I think that's an interesting area. Your PhD in natural health. Where did you do that work?
I'm also a certified traditional naturopath, and I got that first. So I was already into natural health and all that. And then I got the PhD in natural sciences from the University of Natural Medicine.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. Your first question, Frank.
And Dr. Young, when we talked earlier, we're talking about the balance and how, especially in young children, if we can focus on young children that are battling and struggling with neurobehavioral disorders, and we're not just talking about autism here, we're talking about ADHD, oppositional defiance disorder. And many of our listeners out there, they have families or a family member that are battling and going through this struggle. And what is the balance protocol diet or the spectrum balance protocol? It's just not about gluten or casein, removing that from the diet, is it? Or what's that involved?
No, it's not. And number one, we called it the spectrum balance because what you're saying is exactly correct. It used to be autism, and then there was ADD, and then there was ADHD, and then there was OCD and ODD and PDD and OS, and it just gets bigger and bigger. It seems like every week there's a new diagnosis that's somewhere on the autism spectrum. And autism parents have a tendency to really research everything carefully. I've always said that I'll put an autism mom against anybody at the CIA any day, because they really do their research. But as a result, they have a tendency sometimes to get a little over-focused. So if you say, well, it works on ADD, the protocol, will it work on ADHD? And the answer is yes, it works all the way across the spectrum. What this diet does is it works on a imbalance between iron and manganese, and not magnesium, manganese. And iron and manganese take the same receptor sites in the brain. So if there is iron, not bioavailable in the diet, then the manganese will take the receptor sites that the iron is supposed to have. Once that happens, it creates a really strong sensory overload, sight, light, hearing, everything. Everything just gets way too big, and it causes a lot of these symptoms that you see all the way across the autism spectrum.
Mm-hmm. By the way,
what the diet does, the protocol, is it works on getting the manganese out of the receptor sites that it does not belong in and getting the iron put into the receptor sites. So, yes, we're getting rid of grains and all of that because grains have an anti-nutrient called phytate. And when you have phytate in your diet, then it makes the iron less bioavailable, allowing the manganese to get into the sites.
Yeah, by the way, I have a son who's in the autism spectrum. And highly functional, and most people, it takes a long time for them to conclude that he has that. But he would have been called Asperger's when they used to use that terminology. And so it's interesting. Talk a little bit about your research and what you're seeing in that.
Well, it's been pretty amazing. I mean, from the very first child, it's funny because my anniversary just passed. June 5th was the very first child in 2005. So it's now the protocol is now 10 years old. that we worked on. And it was kind of a surprise, to tell you the truth, because we didn't know that this was going to so profoundly affect his autism. But once we worked with him, then we started working with other children, and we're seeing anything from, a lot of help to complete reversals. And it's also too, not just in the little kids, because a lot of people think that unless you get to a child by the time they're 2 years old, that nothing's going to help. And we've been reversing late teenagers and adults and everything else with the protocol. It's a shift in diet, definitely, for a lot of people, because it's no processed food. It's real food, and you have to cook it. At this point in time, there's no place that you can drive through or anything like that, to find the food, and that's been kind of the difficulty with a lot of people. But I think that it's easier to cook than it is to have a child on the autism spectrum.
Yeah, I think so. I think so for everyone, and especially the child. Frank?
And Dr. Young, when we look at differential diagnosis, and I know the moms out there across the country, when they have that child battling through a neurobehavioral disorder, differential diagnosis is huge. And so what can you give the parents right now out there, or even family members? Is it a simple trace mineral type of panel that should be done besides all the other different diagnosis, differential diagnosing that can be done, before we go to this premature drug pathway, and especially in young kids?
Well, before you even talk about doing mineral testing or doing any kind of medical testing, my suggestion is just to get on the diet. Just get on the protocol, because the worst possible thing that could happen is nothing.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. True.
Frank, we have about
a scenario, we're getting reversal. In worst case scenario, the kid eats a healthy diet.
We got about a minute left, Frank. You want to wrap up with your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, Dr. Young, what you're doing is phenomenal, and it's like many other healthcare professionals across the country. And when we educate parents, especially, and to get the answers, to get to the root cause of what's creating the problem, the work you're doing is just phenomenal. But what I'd like to ask you, just one final thought here really quick, is, in your experience, now you've been at this wellness center for about 14 years. Mm-hmm. Do you feel we're making headway as far as, other healthcare professionals, turning the corner as far as traditional medicine versus natural medicine?
That's very difficult to say, because a lot of healthcare people that I know, they really don't want to reverse it. They prefer something that requires long-term expensive treatment as opposed to short-term inexpensive treatment. So,
and where can we get more information on your Spectrum Balance protocol? What website can we direct our listeners to? NoHarmFoundation.org.
Thank you very much. Excellent. And you can reach Frank at CAOOY.org. Thanks to both of you. Great segment. By the way, when we come back, much more for you. Do want to remind you, best content here is over there at US Daily Review. And you're listening to The Price of Business.